at what our values are and what our policies are. And in the SNP, we're very clear. We reject the conspiracy of silence which exists on £18 billion of public sector cuts. We want to see investment in our public services. We want to rejoin the European single market. We believe migration is a good thing for our economy and for our public sector. We think that the state of Palestine should be recognised and a ceasefire should be immediately put in place. And of course, we believe in Scotland's democratic right to choose. So for voters in Scotland, the choice is simple. Vote for what you believe in and vote for who you believe will put Scotland's interests first. And in that context, Ed, I believe that vote should be for the SNP.
It's very interesting, though, that you referred there to what's happening in Scotland, the polls and the seats and how things turn out. Because your leader in Scotland, John Swinney, said, when he launched the party's manifesto last month, if the SNP wins a majority of seats in Scotland, it should trigger a second referendum on independence. The latest polls all have Labour ahead of the SNP. An expectation that Labour will win more seats than the SNP in Scotland. On that same logic, the case then for an independence referendum goes, doesn't it? Because Scotland's chosen Labour, not the SNP.
Well, of course, it doesn't end the argument for Scottish independence. Now, firstly, we've got 2 days to go, and I would urge voters to vote for who they believe will put Scotland's interests first, and I believe that is the SNP. And we're very much in the mix right across the entirety of Scotland, and we're confident that we can indeed win on Thursday and defy the expectations of some of the political commentariat. But the premise of your question has probably been answered by Sir Keir Starmer when he has effectively told the people of Scotland, irrespective of how they vote, he's going to ignore what happens on election day. So if the people of Scotland vote for a party who believes in Scottish independence, the UK Prime Minister is saying no to that. That's simply not good enough.
The premise of my question wasn't what Keir Starmer said. It was what John Swinney said. He said, if the SNP wins a majority of seats in Scotland, it should trigger a second referendum on independence. So obviously, if the SNP doesn't win a majority of seats in Scotland, it doesn't trigger a referendum on independence. I mean, that's right, isn't it? Or else it's totally illogical.
Ed, as I'm sure you... So Ed, as I'm sure you would expect me to argue right now, we firmly believe that we can and will win the election on Thursday. So I don't actually think there's a credibility to your question.
No.
We can maybe have that discussion on Friday once the election has been concluded, because we believe
Mr. Flynn, it wasn't me who speculated.
And what we are standing for is very clear to the people of Scotland.
Mr. Flynn, it wasn't me who speculated about what would happen. It was John Swinney. He said, if you win a majority of seats, this is what would happen. So, you know, I'm not asking you to respond to me. I'm asking you to respond to your own leader in Scotland. He's right, isn't he? If you win a majority of seats, it makes the case. If you don't win a majority of seats, the case goes. I mean, are you saying John Swinney is wrong?
No, of course not. Well, what I'm arguing is the fact that we will win this election on Thursday and be able to take forward the mandate that the people of Scotland give us. And that's the most important thing here, what the people of Scotland believe should and shouldn't happen. Now, I'm deeply concerned about the fact that UK Westminster-based politicians don't seem to want to respect that, and that's simply not good enough. But that's an argument for why we need SNP representation there, because we'll always stand up to the Westminster status quo, the Westminster consensus, and put Scotland's interests first. And I'm afraid that this notion that a general election will ultimately define the outcome of Scotland's constitutional future is for the birds as well, because around 50% of the people of Scotland want Scotland to be an independent nation. They want the people of Scotland to be able to determine their own future, and no UK Parliament or UK Prime Minister can curtail the will of the Scottish people in that context, Ed.
Yeah, I think you might have to have a word with John Swinney, because he made exactly the opposite case at your manifesto launch. It's not an argument with me or Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak. Sounds like